and you kept waiting and waiting and nothing happened. It's because we had some technical issues, but we're back today. I appreciate Milan and Kay being flexible enough to join us. They said, hey, what else are we going to do, right? We're glad they're with us. This is a really, this is a tough season. This is a challenging season. And all the way from, where you're going to find your groceries, to people worried about their jobs, to all the health concerns that can be honestly terrifying at times. There's a lot of grief. There's a lot going on. Right. And one of the things that I was thinking that is hard for everybody is the fact that there is a lot of isolation. Just a lot of isolation. People are in their homes. They are. And I'm going to introduce Milan and Kay to you in just a second, but just the fact that we're in our homes and we're used to being in relationship with people in small doses, and suddenly we're like drinking from a bucket, with being with our people, whether that's roommates or or husband and wife, kids, extended family, parents, whomever. There's a lot of relationship opportunities going on. And that can be really challenging. Some of the people watching are in situations that really aren't even safe, which we'll talk about. So it's not even just like, oh, it's uncomfortable. You're in my space. You're breathing my air. Your computer is competing with my computer, or boredom, or your crisis. They're crisis parenting kids. There's just a lot going on. Right. And that's why we thought it'd be really helpful to have Milan and Kay with us today. They are our good friends. Milan is an ordained minister and a pastoral counselor. He's the director of a counseling center called Relationship 180. And Kay is a licensed marriage and family therapist. And together they have written the books How We Love and the book How We Love Our Kids. These are two of my favorite books. My copies are underlined and dog-eared, and there's links to them where you can get them. They're available on Amazon and directly from them. But they teach workshops on attachment theory and around the world. Here in the United States, they are very busy people, but they are some of the sweetest, the nicest, funniest, goofiest. They're wonderful people, and so I'm so glad, particularly Milan is the goofball, but we're just glad that they're with us today. And there's a handout and a worksheet that you can download in the comment section of this episode on this Facebook Live. And Milan and Kay will be referring to some of those as we go along. So Milan and Kay, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us. It's wonderful to be with you, and thank you for all you do to help people.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity for people to really connect around a theme that is very distressing to us all. And we have two choices. We're going to build this into something more positive, or it can break us down. And we want to talk about those tensions.
Absolutely. So let's just dive in. I've mentioned, that you teach on attachment theory, and for anybody who's not really sure what attachment theory is and loves what you guys call love styles, if somebody watches The Bachelor, I suppose they could think of all kinds of things with connected with that. I don't think that's what you had in mind. So give us a little bit about attachment and love styles.
Attachment research is a 70-year research from all around the world of people studying what goes really well in this early experience with an infant and in years subsequent. And then what are some of the things where that experience isn't as great as others have had those experiences. And what happens is from our family of origin, we absorb. We don't cognitively think. We absorb relational and emotional experiences that unknowingly we carry forward into our adult relationships. And if we had a very secure experience, then relationships will be a place where we find comfort. They'll be easy, there's a confidence, and there's a low level of reactivity. If we didn't have quite as a secure experience, we're going to be one of the more insecure attachment styles, which are a little bit more reactive, each in their own way. and they are the avoider, the pleaser, the vacillator, the controller, and victim. In case you're going to tell us about the avoider, since Kay once was an avoider.
Yes, that was my lifestyle coming into marriage, and it animated me for the first 15 years. I had no idea that that was true, but an avoider grows up in a home probably like mine, where there's just not a lot of talk about emotions at all.
Right.
In fact, I got in trouble if I cried, or I got in trouble if I got angry. So I learned to just hide all those emotions. And if you hide emotions long enough, pretty soon you aren't aware of them at all. And for the avoider, usually the home is more based on task and mastery, and those are the things that are applauded. So I don't have any memories of my parents ever asking me how I felt about anything. I don't have memories of comfort. And so as an adult then, as I grew up and I got married, I was very independent. I was used to making decisions on my own. I didn't realize, if you ask an avoider how they are, they always say the same thing: I'm fine. Yeah. And they don't have a lot of empathy. I don't remember receiving a lot of empathy, and I don't think I was very good at giving it early on. So those are some of the traits of the avoider. And if you're in relationship with avoider, they're going to feel like they're going to run away from your emotions and other people's emotions, and they won't ask you personal questions. And they won't be real empathetic and in tune with what you're going through.
That's the avoider.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Pleasers are fear-based and insecure, and they're proximity seekers, whereas the avoider wants to be further apart. Pleasers want to connect, and they find that they feel more safe when they're close. But it's really insecurity that drives them toward people. And what can happen is they're fear-based. They would be labeled what many would call codependent. Other people's demeanor dictates theirs. Other people's moods dictate theirs. And so they struggle. And they are typically the rescuing type of an individual that is trying to caretake everybody. And so to make sure they're okay, because if everybody's okay, then they're okay. So they are very absorbed in the stresses of other people and in the moods of others. If you ask them how are they don't know. They're very focused on everybody else and trying to measure the moods of people around them. And as that was my former broken love style, and it was exhausting.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So talk about the vacillator.
So you would say pleasers are always taking the temperature.
They do. They're always taking the temperature.
Yeah,
I didn't stick a thermometer in Kay's mouth, but I did ask her many times a day, how are you? Is everything okay? Et cetera, et cetera. And it was basically due to an insecurity. What I would do is I'd end up smothering her or being overwhelming to her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the vacillator, Kay, is in the attachment literature is called the ambivalent or preoccupied. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that.
Okay. So vacillators usually grow up with some good connection. It's just inconsistent and more maybe based on the mood of the parent or the availability of the parent. So this kind of turns the kids longing up on high, and they just feel kind of chronically dissatisfied with the amount of connection that they're getting, but they get enough to want more. And so for the vacillator, then they do very well as they grow up in the dating phase, because there's a lot of time, there's a lot of connection. And then as time goes on, they feel chronically disappointed because they have very ideal standards. We call them the idealists, sometimes the perfectionist. But there's a reason for that. If they can keep everything really ideal, then they don't ever have to feel the pain of feeling that they're not special, they're not wanted, they're not connected. And so they're very focused on connection. And when they get stressed, they tend to protest. And it's usually because of the disappointment of lack of connection, wanting something to be better than it is. And so for the vacillator, I think they suffer the most of all the styles because they're very in tune with their own angst about all that.
Huh. So they feel it. They haven't gone to sleep like the avoider.
That's right.
They're not unaware necessarily as much of other. They're very intensely attuned to themselves.
Yes, and they know, and they suffer a lot because of that, and they're preoccupied as well. So they're always rehearsing and reviewing things, and they're in their head a lot, and that causes anxiety. There's a lot of anxiety in the vacillator, but many times it gets covered over with anger, and so they don't really stop and get help for that anxiety.
Okay, keep going.
Okay, so lastly, we have the home that is chaotic and disorganized. This is a home that is described as being a place of fear for the child, a place where the child actually has fright without solutions. They're trapped in a place where the parents who are supposed to be the caretakers for the children are also dangerous. And so the child is in a bind. Attachment is disorganized. Attachment is chaotic. And so this child typically will turn into one of two modes when they become an adult. They'll either become highly controlling because they felt so miserable to be down in the lower position, being dominated and intimidated and fearful, that they move to the top position in adulthood, and they simply are creating a world of control and dominance so that surprise is taken away, shock is taken away, predictability is high, and it is then that they feel safe. Or they stay in that disadvantaged role of being the victim, and they learn to tolerate the intolerable, and they've continued that in their adulthood. So they don't have the ability to resist, oppose, offer opinions, to be contrary. They just know that all brings on trouble. So they want to stay below the radar. So they lack an adult voice. They lack the musculature to have boundaries and say no. And when they're really frightened and stressed, they often will reduce to being one of the kids in the house. They cannot even protect the other kids. Now, this could be male or female. This is not about gender. Yeah. These are attachment styles that can be either male or female.
Wow, I've heard you talk about that some before, and it's and of course read your books, and it's fascinating to me. And I know we're going to keep unpacking that a little bit more, but there is a love style quiz for anybody who's watching this at howwelove.com. You can go there, but we also have it there in the comment section, or at least the link that will take you to that. And Milan K, is that something you want people to be looking at right now, or just have as they look at it later?
Well, I think it's better just to look at it later, because right now, I mean, that will go back and kind of give you more insight later on. But I think right now that'll be distracting. It's better to just
so resist the urge to download that and start going through that until we get a little further down the road here. So how do each of these love styles, how do people with one of these love styles, how do they react to stress? And how might they be reacting this is such a stressful time for everybody. It's not even just, a few people are affected, millions. I mean, the whole globe is affected. So how might our love style affect the way that people are reacting with stress right now?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the avoider is going to be very detached. They're going to get busy doing tasks. They're not going to be very aware of other people and how they're feeling. They'll minimize and dismiss someone's anxiety or someone's feeling of, just wanting more connection. So they're going to tend to pull away. You kind of got that high school psychology class where we can fight, we can flee, or we can freeze, and they flee.
Okay.
So they can't go very far, but they can walk into the other room. They can go tinker in the garage, or they can get busy, maybe baking, cooking, whatever, to avoid really getting too deep. They're not going to be too reactive emotionally to this situation because they just don't feel anything. And it's not that they're holding out. They just sincerely don't have a language for emotions.
Okay. Now, the exception to that, Kay, is that if you back them into an emotional corner, they'll come out swinging.
Okay.
And this is where again, where they're going to struggle being in situations where they're, if you will, trapped in confined environments or in relationships where there's no escape. And if they feel like they're chronically being put into a corner, they will get angry. And I hear stories and have over the years of people that get super angry when they're pushed into a corner. And that is one of the key responses. Additionally, Katie, your point, they're not going to have empathy for another person's distress. They won't understand how another person is afraid, agitated. They won't be able to connect with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then the pleaser is going to be on hyper vigilant alert. Their radar is going to be on max power. They're going to read and look at everything, and they're going to really wear themselves out with worry and anxiety. They're very much fear-based, as I said earlier. And what happens with that is they throw all that into hyperdrive. And when they do, they go to catastrophe. So what happens is with pleasers, if you think through all the worrisome possibilities, all of them end up in catastrophic thought. And, the Bible tells us to whatever is right and honorable and lovely, if there's anything worthy of praise, let your mind dwell on these things. So once upon a time, I used to be in that camp, and I had no ability to govern and control the level to which the catastrophe went. And as a result, the family felt that, because what happens is you create an atmosphere that's fear-based, and everybody sees your caution, your reserve, your hesitancy, your lack of courage. And so it can be really contagious.
Now, the good thing is, if they're your neighbor, they'll have all the supplies you could ever possibly need.
So it's somebody else.
Well stocked
Yeah,
up.
they're stocked up.
Yeah. Like I said, so it's good in somebody else's house, but just not in your house, right? So you want your neighbor maybe to be that way, but you don't necessarily want somebody you live with to be that way.
Well, that's true. And what happens is, one of the things I used this word earlier, but children absorb the emotional atmosphere of a home. So if they have a worried, fearful parent, they will absorb that worry and fear. And it's important for us to understand the power we have as parents, and that is what children will carry with them, that atmosphere. And so we really need to tell kids it's going to be okay. We can be scared from time to time. We're going to try to acknowledge what's real and what's not. And we're going to do our very best to stay connected and listen to each other's ups and downs throughout the day.
So tell us how a vacillator might be responding to stress right now.
Well, they do a lot of thinking about how this should all be handled. So they're probably going to have a very detailed plan, and they're going to want everybody in the family to cooperate. And if they don't cooperate, then they really feel like, well, you're not on my team. Could you just be on my team? And so to them, being on the same page means we're connected, we're doing well together. So they have a hard time with differing opinions sometimes. Well, I don't think we should do it that way. And so that can be an area of tension for the vacillator. And one of the things a vacillator can really do that would be helpful is, instead of protesting when they get anxious, it's just to kind of get that list of soul words that we've provided on your comment page, and go to the feelings under the anger and express those instead of the frustration,
which are usually fear, anxiety, feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, a lot of overwhelmed feelings inside.
A lot of fear in there.
Okay.
But what the people in the family feel is the anger or the control or the dominance that comes out at this moment. When a person, any of these attachment styles, can get to the real feelings and tell someone how they're really feeling, that is where empathy grows and where compassion grows. And so it's really important to understand that soul word list, Kay, because it gives us those words that are right under the presenting emotions.
Just pausing there for a second. I think that was one of the most helpful things I learned from you guys when I first was introduced to you and then read your book, was the feelings word list. And I'm I'm pretty much a vacillator. Proud of it. I just need
we love vacillator.
A vacillator and proud of it. But anyway,
Recovering.
and I would say I'm pretty much and have always been in tune with what I'm thinking, feeling. I know all of that, but your list of words helped move me past that makes me mad, that makes me sad, that makes me glad. I could identify those basic words, but your feelings word list added some depth of understanding to myself and allowed me to communicate with my husband and with my family, my friends, other parts of myself that could move beyond some of those just basic mad, sad, glad to frightened or overwhelmed, or just the word list has been so helpful. And I know my kids use it now with my grandkids as well. So Milan, talk to us about, or whichever of you are going to talk to us about, that controller victim love style and how they might be experiencing or expressing stress at this point.
Well, they will move in opposite directions. The controller will increase the levels of dominance and control to help mitigate and control the unpredictability of what's going on around them. And they will forcefully impose that upon others. Whereas the vacillator protests for the purpose of trying to create, as Kay said earlier, connection. The controller will dominate or protest and get angry for the purpose of conformity. And that's all they care about, is that everybody do it a certain way. And so they will increase the strength and the dominance with which they will control other people. This can turn dangerous, and we're going to talk about that in a few moments as well.
Go ahead. Let's talk about that. What if
when people are the most stressed, the worst part of us comes out. And so all of us, when we get really scared, can become very controlling. And so what is happening right now, we hear it on the news, and we're seeing it in written documents of the newspaper, that dominance and domestic violence is really increasing. Mm-hmm. And it is often male on female, but there are occasions, and there is a percentage where you have female dominance over males, and males are abused as well. So domestic violence is something that is really important for us to address when we're really confined and trapped with one another. The people on the International Space Station went through special lengthy training to learn how to manage group dynamics so they could hold themselves into a zone where they could all get along, since they can't really get away from each other too far. Yeah. And that's what we have to learn to do. But the avoider, as I said earlier, they can get angry, and they can be, if what they feel very threatened, they can end up being angry as well. And I've seen cases where avoiders just get so overwhelmed with the emotions in the house that they become violent. And vacillators, those three, vacillators, avoiders, and controllers, really can be that way if provoked to severe levels. Victims retreat. They go into a shell, and they quite often tolerate more abuse. They will quite often go for a longer period of time before they'll say anything. They'll hope for a better moment to happen.
And they're afraid.
They're afraid. And so they will take way too much abuse before they do anything about it.
Yeah, if that's your situation, get help, be safe. And, we read something in the paper today in France, they're telling women to go to the pharmacy because it's always open, and tell someone at the pharmacy that you're being abused and you need help, or the grocery store.
Yes.
Places where you could leave the house for those reasons.
Yeah.
I told somebody this week last week, I said, it may be that what you have to do is just simply not be there when your spouse returns. You have to have a go bag ready. You have to have a safe place to go to. And this isn't something you can negotiate with an abusive person. You have to simply make a statement where you're simply not there when they come home. And that's how you protect yourself and the kids.
You know, that's hard enough, I think, in what I would call ordinary
Right.
times to exit an abusive situation.
Mhm.
You know, just 45 years in ministry and having talked to thousands of people through those years, I have just heard story after story of when, if you're not in an abusive situation, it seems so simple to say, just leave, you know, just leave. And yet when people are in those situations, it is far from easy. I know you're not saying that it's easy.
No,
You're
we're
just
not.
saying you're just saying at the end of the day, even though it's hard in normal times, if because things are heating up in this stressful time, this might even be a more urgent time to pay attention to the abusive activities or behavior that's happening in your home. And this is the time to reach out. I know to your faith community, there's hotlines, you know, we'll include that. I know Saddleback Church, you could call Saddleback for sure and have someone talk to you about that, maybe give some counsel. And as you said, Milan, that's not a negotiating conversation.
No.
That's an exit conversation, especially I think when kids are involved in it.
Yes.
So I just had a question about, how do you distinguish between, in these kind of situations, somebody who's an avoider and someone who's a victim? Because it sounds like there's some overlap there. What would classify somebody as just an avoider who doesn't want to talk about it and they're going to just take stuff, and somebody that you would say, oh, their actual love style is, no, they're a victim love style?
Well, I think the main thing is the level of anxiety and fear. A victim freezes and gets just completely paralyzed
Okay.
when their partner is angry or abusive, and whereas the avoider has more of a voice. They will tell you what they want, and they will tell you what they don't want. The victim is pretty voiceless.
Okay.
And I think that's the main difference.
That's a really helpful distinction. So, you know, like I said, we called this getting along while staying at home because we recognize there are just some extra challenges when we're sharing space in large quantities of time. So give us some tips for managing stress with, whether it's with your kids or your spouse or with roommates. Roommates, I was just thinking, you know, maybe you can live with, if you have a roommate that you only see every once in a while and suddenly you see each other all the time, whew, that feels like that could get uncomfortable fast. So give us some tips on managing stress in these close quarters.
Well, I think the first thing is just a level of self-awareness that you are stressed and what is your stress response. You know, we ask people in our audiences when we do workshops to just think about what was modeled to them. What did your mom do when she was stressed? What did your dad do? Because these are our first learnings about how to manage stress. And we do an exercise that I think might be fun for your listeners to do. But just to think of a stressful time recently that you went through, and it should be pretty easy right now to come up with that. And then could you link a few feeling words to that? You know, what did that stressor make you feel? And then what was your behavior? And these are very important questions because generally everybody in the family has a stress response. And while avoiders might detach and pleasers will try and fix you and be nice, etc., you know, sometimes people sleep, sometimes they eat, sometimes they get angry, sometimes they drink or they use drugs. And so, but we really need to think about, you know, to notice when we're stressed. It's a sign we need comfort, because we hear the same words, you know, and from people who think about, well, what were they feeling? And we hear anxious, scared, disappointed, angry, sad. So really stress is about managing difficult emotions. And, you know, when we see someone in our family who's not okay, that's a sign that they need some comfort, they need some help.
So are you gonna tell us that in a little bit, some of that? We'll cover that in just a few minutes, maybe.
Yeah.
All right, so we can talk about that. I think it made me think of two times just very recently that I've had a stress response, and my two different just share with you real quickly kind of my go-to things. So one of the days when I was just feeling, it was very early on in being isolated. We've been at home now for almost a month. So that is a really long time. Rick and I are both 66. We fit into that older American, which I find so incredibly offensive. And Rick, it's easy for him to get pneumonia, upper respiratory stuff. So we just felt like we just need to really protect ourselves.
Right.
So early on in that, just feeling the pressure of us both being at home, both trying to work from home, both being anyway. So I decided I was going to tackle cleaning my closet. Now my closet is a strange shape because of some home construction we did a few years ago. And to accommodate this thing in our bathroom, I had to give up some of my closet space. So now my closet, you almost need it just kind of zigs and zags. And there's this one part that I call deep space because it's far enough away from the door of my closet that I can just kind of like toss things back there occasionally. And in deep space, no one had gone for a long time. And it was full of dust and full of just stuff that I needed to get rid of. And so this one day I just decided I was going to tackle. So I started by just like taking everything out. Well, now suddenly my bedroom floor, my closet is pristine. It's I vacuumed it. I dusted it. Man, it was gorgeous. But now my whole bedroom floor, you can't step anywhere because there's stuff that I've had for 15 years and blah, blah, blah. Don't talk to me about my closet. But nevertheless, the point was that the way that I was handling stress, okay, I can't control what's going on in the world, but I can go into that closet and I can get rid of all the things that are old, out of date, I don't want, they don't fit, whatever. And so that was my way of stress was I'm going to clean the dickens out of that closet. And then another day I decided, food is just a wonderful comfort.
Yes, it is.
And bread in particular is an incredible homemade bread.
Yeah. With
then
butter.
I pulled out
With
my
butter.
recipes. Yes, with a ton of butter. Not just, it's got to have a ton of butter. So I started baking bread and I posted on Instagram that the way I was going to get through the coronavirus crisis was Jesus and homemade bread. Because if I was going to die by the coronavirus or the zombie apocalypse or whatever else is coming, I was at least going to have homemade bread on my lips. So
I like that way of handling stress myself.
Two responses for stress for me. One was to clean like crazy, and then the other was to bake and just forget and have the pleasure of that smell of bread and butter. So I don't know what that makes me, but other than chubby, but unable to fit into the deep space nine.
I love the deep space idea. I'm gonna be thinking about that. But what's interesting, Kay, is those are all things that we also need to do to manage our stress. As we clean, as we cook, we feel productive. We feel like we're making progress. We can take something that's disordered and create order with it and make it look pristine, to use your word. And so those things are helpful. Some people, though, that's all they do is non-relational ways to find relief. So it's important to do both. Those kinds of things are wonderful. But there's also an important element, which is to add relational relief. And this is what God calls us to do in all the one another's of Scripture, to comfort one another. How can we comfort each other if I don't know where you're uncomfortable inside? We're told to encourage each other. How can we be of encouragement if we don't know where we're discouraged? We're told to bear one another's burdens. How can we do that if I don't know where to grab a hold and lift up? So there's this transparency that God is calling us to do as Christians. And for many people, Kay, and you know this with all your extensive work with people around the world, addictions come in here very readily. And of course, the good work of Celebrate Recovery is all about how addictions mask and cover these horrible feelings we have on the inside. We haven't learned to bring ourselves into relationship to experience relief. Now, I love to go exercise, swim laps, go for a run, whatever the case may be. But we also learn to bring in relational relief into our relationship. And this is what Jesus did the night he had his most stressful night, the night before he died. He was in the Garden of Gethsemane. He had 11 disciples. He put the big group by over here in a group. He took Peter, James, and John, and he took them to a place and he said, my soul's distressed to the point of death. Come watch and pray with me. And the word soul is a Greek word suke, P-S-U-C-H-E, which is the word soul, but we get our word psychology from it. He described his inner self and then asked for horizontal support from Peter, James, and John. Hmm. He had self-awareness, horizontal support, and then he had vertical support when he asked God for help to manage this stressful event that was coming the next day. So if we follow his model, we learned that both are important. I mean, he could relax and go for a walk on water. So, you know, he was by himself going for a walk on water, you know, and he could do things to be alone, but he also found relief in relationship.
Yeah. So, you know, that was just making me think of my kids and grandkids live close by, and they're the ones I miss the most.
Oh, I know.
I mean, I miss my friends. I miss the people I work with. I miss everything. You know, I miss everything and everybody, but I miss my kids and my grandkids the most. And so last week we were all just at kind of like this bursting point of if I don't see you, if I don't lay eyes on you, FaceTime doesn't feel like enough. A phone call doesn't feel like, if I don't lay eyes on you, I think I'm just going to explode. And so we went out onto kind of this country area and set up our deck chairs, you know, I mean, our like camp chairs, sporting chairs, set them up about, my son Josh had a measuring tape. And so he was measuring. we went really far. We went like 21 feet apart from each other.
Wow.
And, you know, so around just in a big circle where we could see each other, and the grandkids were, you know, they were running over they were staying, and then they each had a big stick. So that was about 7 feet. So you had the kids had the stick, so they could tell when they were like getting too close to each other. They had their stick and they could measure that out. So, I mean, it was pretty silly. You feel dumb in one sense to do that. But on the other hand, there was just this, it filled our emotional cup to be able to be in each other's presence. Rick and I we got in the car yesterday and drove, one of our kids was out. But they were home. So we parked in their driveway, opened the car window. They came out on their porch, you know, and it was the same thing. I know lots of people are resorting to seeing the people that they love or they care about through that way. But I mean, bread only filled my soul so far. Cleaning my closet only filled my soul so far. Then there was the hunger of relationship,
Right.
of community, of presence in some way or the other with people that matter to me. So what if you don't have your people? What if you don't live near your people? Or what if it's just not possible? What if you're not particularly, maybe, you know, how many people have just moved to where they live and they haven't even established relationships and stuff around them yet? What do you say when people aren't near?
Well, then you are kind of stuck with FaceTime and connecting online. But I think they're particularly vulnerable. You know, people who have just moved or are alone. And, you know, we've tried to just be even more friendly to people who walk. And particularly if we see someone who's walking alone, just to really go the extra mile in greeting them. And it's very difficult to be separated. And, you know, when you need to reach out, even if it's to someone, you know, that you know from where you used to live, or kids that live in another state. Yeah.
I was thinking of, in your book, you talk about the comfort circle, and you said that what we need when we're stressed is comfort. Mm-hmm. And so talk to us a little bit about the comfort circle, or what we can actually do when we're feeling stressed, or like when we're reacting to each other and we need to, how do we respond in a more positive way?
Sure.
Well, the comfort circle, if you think of a clock, going clockwise, at the top is just awareness. Milan was a cleaner when he was stressed. And for the first 15 years we were married, I had no idea he was doing that because his anxiety just went through the roof. And really, you didn't either.
I have a messy garage now
Yeah.
that I only clean when I want to, not by default.
Yes. But to be aware that he wasn't okay, and then to go say, hey, you're cleaning. I know that's a stress response for you. So come talk to me and pick some words off the list and let's see what you're feeling. So just self-awareness and awareness of when other people are stressed. And then
sometimes she'd wait until I was done cleaning. Then she'd ask me, how are you?
I did. I admit it.
Well, the garage does need to be cleaned sometimes.
Yeah, it does.
Right.
Yeah. And if you're good at it, you might as well do it. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And then the next step is just to engage, which means that we seek a person out when we need, when we're stressed and we're dealing with difficult emotions, or we notice someone else is not doing well and we engage with them. So engage is the next step. And then the third step is just to listen deeply. And, the Bible says, be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And, listening deeply means you don't ask one question, maybe you ask 4 or 5 questions. And, curiosity is the key word here. And so one of our handouts that we're going to give your listeners is a sheet that says practicing conversations, and it has some great questions you can ask, and then just validation statements can be so important. Just, I see where you could feel that way, or that makes sense to me. And sometimes we need to improve in our ability to just listen and validate, not fix.
Can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
Because I've heard you explain this before, and I think it's super helpful. How do you, because validation makes it sound like, we're just hitting the high points here, but validation, if you say we need to validate them, or I can understand how you might feel that way. What if on the inside, you do not at all understand why they feel that way, how come they're feeling that way, or maybe even what they're saying doesn't even necessarily make sense. So how does validation work how does that work? How does that work?
A great question.
Validation is to recognize that the other person is a person. They have their own experiences that are not mine. And so a simple way to validate someone is to say something like, I can see how from your perspective you would feel that way. I could see how from your experience that might be, I could see why you would see this situation the way you're seeing it or feeling it. Or I could see why you'd have that opinion. Or I could see why this would be hard for you to listen to.
Or I can't possibly understand what you're going through because it's so severe and I've never been through it.
Mm-hmm.
But all I can tell you is I'm with you, and I really want to hear what your experience is and how it's affecting you and any way that I can support you.
Yeah, it's allowing the other person to be a person.
Is it okay to fake it?
What do you mean?
Well, is it okay to, let's just say somebody is saying something from their point of view and how they feel, and it really doesn't resonate in your own self as being reasonable, rational, but let's just say you're trying to learn how to become somebody who validates somebody else when they're sharing their deep feelings. Is it okay to kind of fake it at the beginning, to just sit, in other words, to practice for yourself? Like, I liked what you said, Kay, like I could never really possibly understand what you've gone through, but I want to be close to you, or I want to understand. So is it okay to kind of put a little bit of a preface there that basically says in a nice way, you're nuts, but I love you anyway?
And what you're really saying is fake it till you make it.
I'm asking, is there?
I think it's an important skill to learn. And, sometimes if we just can ask a few more questions, it might make more sense. But many times when we hear something we don't like, we just immediately tell them why that's silly, why that they shouldn't feel like that, versus saying, okay, well, that's hard for me to understand, but I want to understand. So could you help me a little more here? Like, how does that make you feel? Or so I think it's putting on that curious hat, which is hard for us to do because, we react to other people when they're stressed.
Yeah.
We don't think, oh, they're not okay. I need to really listen to them and be curious and trying to understand them.
So
Now,
what if
you said something important a moment ago. You said when they're not reasonable or rational. When a person is not reasonable or rational, I know something else is going on. I know that they are very flooded with emotions, and I know that their emotions have basically taken over. And when that happens, we get flooded with emotions, and our left brain kind of goes offline, which is our reasoning, our rationality, our language, our sequential thought. And that's a really important time to say to them, there must be strong emotions that are driving your thoughts and feelings right now. What are some of those emotions? And I guarantee you 100%, well, to be safe, 99.999, that there are strong emotions animating those statements that to you seem not rational.
That's really helpful. I like the way both of you answered that. And I feel like that allows for the possibility of, man, I don't see it the way you see it, but I hear about you. I like the idea of continuing, just curious, asking for more information, not in a way that's like bugging them or like picking at them. It's more like genuine curiosity. I want to understand,
Right.
help me understand. And then what you said, Milan, just then about if somebody isn't being rational or reasonable, or their response doesn't feel it to you, maybe it's super over the top or whatever, is to recognize that there's a ton of emotion that is flooding them. And then to, even rather than respond, I would say, to that emotion, I'm hearing you say, rather than react to their reaction,
Yes.
pause and recognize what is something really major is going on inside of them.
Right.
And so that's the moment to really be probably gentle and not reactive ourselves. That's super. So what if we blow it? So what about those times when your roommate, your spouse, your kids, your parents, whatever, they are stressful in a way that's hurtful, or they say things, or they're angry, or they're controlling, or they're all these things, and you respond not with the tell me more. You've responded with your own stress reaction. How do we make those? What do we do? How do we make it right again?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
With self-awareness growing and increasing, and by that I mean aware of my emotions on the inside. From Genesis to Revelation, our God is a very emotional God. He has every emotion in the book. And he tells us what's in there, why it's there, how it got there, and what he's going to do about it. So God's very self-aware and conversant with us about his emotions. So with self-awareness and other awareness and a little bit of time, we can usually know that we hurt each other, or what I said was out of line. And so what Kay and I will do, excuse me, we'll tell the other person, look, I got started in a wrong track there, or I misspoke, or I was unkind, or I was impatient. And we'll do this thing that the Bible calls confession. and we will tell the other person, I see what you felt, and I apologize for that. I told Kay yesterday on a walk, I said, I'm tired, I'm a bit frustrated with XYZ, and I'm feeling impatient today. I'm sorry it's leaking out on you, but that's my emotional state. And she said, what do you need? And I said, I don't know, but let's take some time and give me a few moments and a little while and stop talking to me and asking me questions going uphill. Wait till we get to the top and we're going downhill, and then I'll try and come up with an answer.
I like that. I like, Kay, I like that you were self-aware and able to say, listen, I'm feeling stressed about this, and this. I'm not upset at you. There's this, and this. And Kay, you asking back, what do you need? That right there it feels like that would interrupt the cycles sometimes of conflict that happen in relationships, to, rather than for you to have said, well, yeah, stop it, you're being really mean to me, or which sometimes is still appropriate, but nevertheless, you, because of the way he presented that to you, you were able to say, so what do you need? And Milan, you go, I don't know yet, but give me a few minutes and I'll be able to tell you a little bit more about it. That goes into, somebody just asked the question, how do you comfort each other when you're both depleted? When you're both, it sounds like yesterday, Kay, you were able to receive Milan's confession of being irritable, and you weren't, it didn't fluster you. You didn't respond back. You were able to really be with him in his feelings. But what if you're both depleted? How do you handle stress? How do you comfort each other when you're both feeling so empty?
I think, one of the things we really encourage people to do is at the end of the day, or when you're in that kind of a state, just to pick a couple feeling words off that list. And the list is really important because you'll see words there that you would never choose if you weren't really looking at a prompt, especially for avoiders. They don't know unless they're looking at a list. But to be able to talk about what is inside, and then maybe just to say something as simple as, when everybody's in bed, let's just sit on the couch and snuggle. Let's just cuddle up, and, we had a hard day. We were kind of at each other. Let's have a redo. And, redos, I don't think you ever outgrow in any relationships that you are close, the need for redos. And, but I think physical touch is so important. And if both people are tired, just to kind of cuddle up together and listen to some good music or watch a movie, but touch can be so important.
You guys have also, you teach, we'll have to do another one on this one, but you also do a lot of presentations on how we love sexually. And I'm going to bring that in here. That wasn't on our list of things to talk about per se, but when we're talking about stress and the places where people can even, sex is a great way that God has given, is helping with stress relief and comfort, and for married couples. But so when you just talking there about snuggling or cuddling, and you're both feeling depleted, it feels like, and maybe you can tell me whether you agree with this or not, that it feels like there are times in which when sex is really comforting and encouraging, and there are other times, as you said, physical touch without necessarily a sexual connotation is also very healing and restorative.
So this is something that especially guys need to learn. A lot of guys, because we live in a hypersexualized world, a lot of guys will equate physical touch and closeness and snuggling with sexual entrees. And what men need to learn to do, what I had to learn to do myself, was to separate physical, non-sexual touch from sexual touch, and to be able to negotiate out of emotional, spiritual, physical closeness and intimacy, sexual opportunities that are congruous emotionally, congruous spiritually, congruous with really how we feel. If we use sex as something, as an activity, and it's incongruous, for instance, with grief or sadness, or a person is really distressed on the inside, we want to be able to address that with just simple physical touch, nurture, I see you, give me 3 feeling words, and reach resolution that way, and not rush to a sexual connection.
Right.
So for just, you want to just clarify what you mean by incongruous or with you, or you just clarify that. Just use another word besides that to clarify.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I think what you're saying is, to make it very clear, I want to snuggle. I don't want to have sex. I just need some physical touch. I need to feel like, someone's close to me. We're both depleted. I learned about myself that I had to really check inside. And can I be congruent? Is this a good time? Or do I really need to process something first? And maybe the touch needs to be non-sexual. And then that's very healing. And then the next day I'm much more open.
That's good. I just know that that is such a, that can, of all the things that can cause conflict and even resentment in couples as they're trying to face stressful situations, is how they relate physically to each other, and can either make a situation better or worse. And so I like the fact that you talked about how important it is, but to also, again, use your words, use your language,
Yes.
communicate with each other. Well, you guys, thank you so much for this time. Thanks for all that you've shared. I'm grateful just that you live your lives with integrity. And I've watched you over these years to know that these are not just theoretical principles. This is your life. This is the way you live. And I've learned so much from both of you. And thanks for being with us today. Appreciate it
Our
so much.
pleasure. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you for
having us.
having us, Kay. As always, it's such a pleasure.
Good to be with you.